I'm Marcus Blake here at the studio at That Nerd Show, and we are speaking with director Luke Sparke of his new film, Occupation Rainfall. Or Occupation Rainfall. I keep saying occupational. I don't know why. But anyway, great sci-fi film that's coming to Amazon. And congratulations. I don't think many directors actually get to direct a sequel. And this is, in fact, a sequel to a film you did a couple of years ago, right?
That's correct. Yeah, Occupation back in 2018.
All right. Well, I love the film. I can definitely see a lot of influences from other sci-fi and some little hidden nods in there. I especially I thought it was an Easter egg about a nod to Wing Commander, the old PC game that had 20 years ago. But so, how did all of this come to you? And what was your inspiration for being able to write the first film and then to be able to do the sequel?
Yeah, well, the first one I kind of did it by the seat of my pants. It was just it came up within a meeting over in LA when I was pitching other projects, the pitches weren't going very well, and I sort of just threw out an Australian alien invasion movie, and everyone sort of went, "Oh, yeah, that could be pretty good." And my producers were like, "What is this? What is happening now? What story are we telling?" And I wrote the film like on the plane ride home, and then developed it after that. And suddenly, then I had Tamir Morrison coming on board, and sort of different actors that I was like a bit ecstatic with. So it kind of grew as I went. It wasn't until it was supposed to be a one and done film. And in the edit of that movie, towards the end of the edit, I sort of started developing different ideas of where these characters could go. And I sat everyone down and I said, I want to write a sequel, but I want to do it like from scratch, just be big. I just want to do it big. And everyone said, okay, we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. You write it. And I wrote like a 400-page sort of script idea story of where these characters go and what happens and how the whole thing comes to an end. So then we developed it from there, and took 4 years, 20-hour days, 7 days a week, and finally got it finished.
Nice. Yeah, I honestly I didn't realize there was a film that you had done previously to this when we got information about it, so I had to go look it up. Because I watched our screener the first time, and it's like I feel like there's a backstory somewhere that I'm not aware of. And then
I tried to do it where you can just come in and watch it.
Right, and you can, but I'm one of those guys, especially with sci-fi. I want to know more. I want to know what's going on. How do these characters come together? And with the first one, you're kind of like, well, that is definitely a first chapter. Where it happens with all of these characters and stuff. So it was good. Occupation One definitely blew up for us on Netflix in America. A lot of people saw it, a lot of audiences saw it, and was able to get lots of contacts and feedback and fans out of that film releasing over there. So I hope it's the same with this one. What do you think is the hardest part when you do a alien invasion movie? Because I mean, I think there's so many tropes you can fall into, but you also want to be unique.
Yeah, I think that is a huge part, is trying to tell your own story within not going too far on to the left or the right, without going too far off in your own ideas, but having a unique flow throughout the whole thing. I think that is the hardest part, that and all the visual effects.
Right. So you had a lot of the original cast back from the first one into this one. What was their reaction when you let them know, oh yes, we're doing a sequel and you have to be in it?
Obviously they were happy and ecstatic about it. I sort of announced it to them before we did the press tour for the first movie, so they kind of had an idea that it was going to continue on. And it was great because I got to I knew who they were as actors and as the character, so I was able to I know how Temuera speaks, I know his speech pattern, so I was able to write this one and sort of know how he speaks and sort of mold it more for him.
Were you able to shoot this before the pandemic, or?
Yes, we finished filming like December the 19th, 2019. So it was only like a couple of months. It was like 3 months, and suddenly the whole thing was in lockdown.
And you're kind of like, well, this is the time to get editing done, because why?
Exactly. I actually had more visual effects houses come on board because of the pandemic, because everything else shut down. So they came to me and said, hey, your film's in post, can we help on it? And I had people from like ILM and all these other bigger places I wouldn't have probably had access to. So it was kind of like, you take the good with the bad, I guess.
Well, I guess it's kind of a good thing you've got it in the wire because, especially with Tamar Morrison, because he's a little busy right now.
He is a little busy. He's a little busy
Yeah.
right now.
So, and us nerds are very excited for his future projects.
Yeah, I talked to him. I talked to him like a couple of weeks before the Mandalorian season 2 came out, and he's like gave me a heads up on where to watch and that. And even I was on my couch, like doing the Leonardo DiCaprio, pointing at the thing.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So I have to ask this, but this is probably just for us. But I really felt like in some areas I was watching Farscape again. Great Australian sci-fi show. Got introduced to it when I worked at Blockbuster part-time. Am I correct in that there's a little influence there for some Farscape, or is that just something I'm kind of seeing?
Maybe something you're seeing. I never watched the show when it first came out, so I kind of missed it. So maybe it's just a happy coincidence.
Oh, well, okay. Well, but if there's some similarities, that's also a really good thing, because I think that's one of the great hidden gems of a sci-fi show.
Yeah, when I watched it again, yeah.
Yeah. So you get to do a sequel. Obviously, you kind of leave this on a cliffhanger, so to speak, where there is more room and you're not untelling these stories. Do you have an idea of where you want to go? Whether it's a trilogy or being able to tell a whole saga? Because I thought it was kind of interesting that you did this and it's part 1 or chapter 1.
Yeah. Obviously, I did that for a reason, because I mentioned before about 400-page outline.
Yeah.
I asked the guys. I said I need to cut it in half, and I need to do chapter 2. Everyone agreed. So the script's been finished. It's done. It's fantastic. I've got some other writers in LA that come on board to really make it pop and be juicy. We're in active development of it right now. We're casting, so hopefully by the end of the year, early next year, cameras can roll. We're kind of waiting to see the reaction from America, so that would be interesting. It's nice to have a little bit of a. The last time I went we released Occupation 1, and like a week later, I was in pre-production of chapter 2, so I didn't get a chance to kind of do anything. It's nice to have a break, do the publicity. I'm working on a TV pilot for a different franchise anyway, and then we'll see how this one goes. But all intents and purposes, we're casting. It's huge. This movie had 1,500 visual effects shots. The next one has like nearly 3,000 visual effects shots. So it's
wow. Okay, great.
Massive.
All right, so talking about Australia as the setting, and I know you're from Australia, but I always I think Australia is kind of a metaphor. It's like the last refuge. There's an alien invasion. Everything else is gone. This is like your Alamo, and I'm making a Texas reference, but do you feel like this movie couldn't be the same kind of story if it was set somewhere else that it is? It's pretty much perfect because it is set in Australia.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Australians have a different sort of little bit different mentality and the way that sort of comes across in the characters and that. It is interesting. Let's have a unique spin on it. So yeah, I definitely agree with every point you just made there. It's kind of how I saw it. And it's interesting because the first movie was very localized within just like a small town, which was the idea. This one's kind of Australia. The next one will kind of go into the world stage. So it's kind of like the Die Hard films, how there's always the plaza, the airport, New York gets bigger every time.
Right. Yeah. That's a reference too. Now I'm assuming as a director, you are on the side that Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Yes. It's not Christmas until I see Hans Gruber fall off that building every year.
I agree. We kind of had a discussion about Australia as, a land that, especially from a Western standpoint, last year, because it was the 30th anniversary of Quigley Down Under, and it was kind of really the first time you got to see this great Western, but set somewhere else, but still have all the same themes as American Westerns.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's interesting that we talked about Australia as that kind of setting and stuff. But when you talk about when you're writing aliens, I figure that's kind of got to be a hard job when you're writing and directing. Is like when it comes to the look, what capabilities you want them to have, and again, not falling into tropes. Can you discuss how you go about when you're writing about aliens?
Yeah, well, I guess you got to figure out what types of aliens I was trying to think. There's obviously Independence Day aliens, which are just like monsters, and there's like they go all the way down the line to, I guess Star Wars or District 9, kind of in the middle, I guess. But I think I went to, even though you don't want to go into tropes, there's definitely pigeonhole sort of stereotypical things you want to fall into. And I think I went a little bit more Star Wars in the approach this movie, where they're kind of sentient beings that can have conversations, and you walk into like the cantina and there's different people going on in Star Wars, and that's kind of what I wanted to have feel like in this movie. Obviously there's a storyline within there without going into spoilers about millions of years ago, evolution and all that kind of stuff that comes into play of how I think about how to build these aliens out and everything like that. It's interesting. It definitely is interesting.
Ken Jeong, funny actor, great. We love him at that nerd show. How did he come on board? Because he seems kind of out of place, but then fits right into it.
Yeah, I mean, I always those two characters, I wrote it as like a Wizard of Oz sort of feel, where the whole movie is this rainfall, go find rainfall, kind of like the yellow brick road. And then Dorothy gets to the Emerald City, and there's like this old guy behind the thing, the big head. And I kind of want it to be like they get all the way to this massive facility, and it's just like two idiots controlling everything. He was kind of like my first choice, and I think he liked it because it wasn't written specifically for him. It wasn't like a little Asian man comes out. He kind of referenced that when he first talked to me. He was like, it's just a guy. And he just happens to be like narcissistic with this other alien and that. So he kind of liked it, and we had a few discussions before he came over, and we shot him out within a couple of days, which was like hugely hectic. But when you have Ken Jeong on set, you kind of just like let him go and do his thing, and things happen, and ad libs happen, and it's hilarious, and have the crew in stitches.
All right, so like I said, I wanted to ask a couple of nerdy questions just for us. The first one might be rhetorical at this point because of the background, but we talk about great sci-fi. So I'm actually going to ask it this way. When it comes to great sci-fi, would you choose Star Trek, Star Wars, or Battlestar Galactica? I'll throw that third one in there as a little bit of a
Look, that's the hard choices, right? Like straight away, I'd obviously say Star Wars because Empire Strikes Back is my favorite movie of all time. The Battlestar Galactica is freaking good. It's fracking good, I'll say. So that's a tough choice.
Yeah, the easy answer is you can like all of them, and we like shows for different reasons, But I absolutely agree with you that it gets tough, and during the pandemic, we were talking about sci-fi shows that you want to go back and binge watch, and a few of us were like, we haven't really watched Battlestar Galactica in a decade, so it's time to go through all that again.
Yeah, they're on my shelf actually to rewatch soon. So I keep walking past and going, I'm gonna rewatch these guys soon.
I know. All right, so here's the nerdy question that we ask all of our filmmakers, and what it is if you could have a weapon of choice or a superpower from within the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose?
Well, I'd probably have to go with like either a lightsaber or the Force. I mean, it's probably a not very interesting answer, but like off the top of my head, like that would make more sense. That would make more sense to me. Like I don't really want to be Superman. I wouldn't want to be, I think the Force or a lightsaber. I think that would be pretty cool.
There's just something about the first time we saw a lightsaber on the big screen, and it's just like, please make that a reality. Star Trek has all its neat little gadgets, which are cool, but it's just that lightsaber. It's just the fact that there's that laser sword that comes out of a handle, and you can cut walls and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I think I feel pretty safe with either the Force or a lightsaber.
All right. I have time for one more question, so I'm going to ask another nerdy question, and I'm going to do it related to Star Wars. As a director or a writer, if Disney called you up and said, "We want you to take on something from the Star Wars universe, and we want you to pick," what would you choose?
Nazi Old Republic.
Nice.
Straight up.
You didn't even have to think about that. I like it.
No.
Yeah, when we heard they're like mastering the game, we got, kind of a vague press release about that. We were all very, very giddy. Like we need not only a game, but we need stories for the Knights of the Old Republic. So,
yeah, like I would love like my whole career trajectory is like, if anyone from Lucasfilm was watching, like please, like for the love of God, have a conversation with me.
And yes, our interviews can turn into pitch videos. So.
I mean, yeah, it's like I would love to do a Star Wars film. I would love to take it on. I'd love to do Nazi Old Republic or something. Obviously, I would not beggars can't be choosers. But if someone said to me, yes, Nazi Old Republic would be love the game. I love the era. I think there's a lot to do there. I think the old trilogy is kind of not played out. I love the dark times, but yeah, I'd love to see something. I'd love to see something different.
Right. Cool. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, Luke, again, congratulations on being able to do the sequel, and there's a third film on the horizon. So I feel like you've got to have your trilogy. It was a lot of fun, and can't wait to see more from it. So
yeah, I appreciate it.
Welcome to the studio at That Nerd Show. I'm Marcus Blake, and we're doing a part 2 of our interview with the cast and crew of Occupation Rainfall. And we are speaking with Dan Ewing from the film. Dan, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you. So, all right. So technically, this film is a sequel. Now, did you ever expect that you were going to get to do a sequel when you did the first film?
Well, first of all, mate, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm a big fan of the show, big fan of Baby Yoda over your shoulder, who I think he's moving. I think he's moving.
He's always up to no good in this office.
I know it's the delay because I'm in Australia, but that might turn him around. No, in answer to your question, no, I think thanks to Luke Sparke, our visionary director, the first film was certainly standalone from what I'd sort of communicated, but because of the reaction, particularly in the US market on Netflix, it you got to give the people what they want, right?
Exactly. Well, and when we were talking with them, I had to confess I didn't know that there was actually a previous film, and I didn't realize it had been on Netflix, and I feel kind of bad considering we're a nerd news outlet, but I was watching this one and I'm like, okay, there's some backstory here that I'm missing. And finally I went and looked it up, like, oh, well, now it makes sense. Why?
It sounds like me when I stepped into the dating world. There's something I'm missing here. I'm not doing this.
That's not just you.
I think, and not to speak for Luke, this is kind of the film he originally wanted to make, but you can't do a film like this on the budget Luke had for the first one. So he made it a much sort of character-driven backstory sort of film. Which, to be honest with you, as self-indulgent actors, we love that shit. It's like we love, we can flesh out where the characters came from, and this is where it is, and then you put them through hell. So it's a different film, but it's one that audiences would really sort of benefit from catching up on before they see the second.
Well, I love the fact that you're setting up a trilogy, and in the main, when it comes to a trilogy, the second film is always much bigger because you're opening up a bigger world. So I mean, you're right that you have the bigger budget to be able to do this film, while the other one is a great way to introduce all your characters. But now sky's the limit. So with that said, you're getting ready for the third. I know it hasn't been announced, but you're getting ready for it, aren't you?
Well, there's a saying in sport, right? You stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And I know what I had to do to get in shape. I had to lose sort of 20 pounds for this film. So,
is that pandemic weight?
No. It was more. I think originally in the draft of the first film, Matt was a bit more of a natural sort of leader and is a bit more in shape. And I'd just done a rugby movie, and the fall from grace from these modern day gladiators. And a lot of them were really sort of suffering. So you'll see with in the first film, Matt is sort of addicted to alcohol and painkillers, and he's playing for sort of what would not like for basketball terms, it'd be like the NBA G League, but below. You know, so he was much higher up. So I wanted to really play that sort of fall from grace and have him not be this instant action hero. But for the second film, obviously it's 2 years down the track and he's not able to live on sort of the diet that he was living on here. And so, yeah, much more sort of sparse food. And I don't think there's was it a whole grains, whole food.
So what is it about sci-fi though? I mean, I figured it's a different kind of acting when you're in a sci-fi film, especially when you're using green screens and you're really having to imagine what the shot's going to be. How, as an actor, how do you go from doing, dramas to a film like this?
Well, that's a great question. It's preparation, simple as that. You'll never really be able to visualize, especially with a guy like Luke, because his vision is so big. You have to make it truthful. So for me, that just means putting in the little character work and the nuance. And I had plenty of training, mate. So for everybody at home who knows me knows that if you have any trouble with rubber monsters, the Black Ranger here is your guy. So I had it very early in my career. So it was like, you can tell when an actor, if they've maybe done just sort of, TV or what have you, the first time they see that tennis ball, or my favorite one I ever saw it's like a broom that you used to sweep the leaves. There's a pink broom with a frowny face on it. But I tell you what, they're great. When you see it on camera, it does work. But it's always really handy when there's a budget to put giant stuntmen in suits and have them kick the shit out of you. That always helps. That's when it's real.
Well, one that we were talking about with Luke was Australia as kind of its own character. We view here in America, we kind of view Australia as the last refuge of society. Especially in the last 30 years, where we're so used to American westerns and the American frontier. But then Quigley Down Under came out 30 years ago, and you're like, oh wow, there's like a whole other world of westerns and this, wildlands and stuff like that. So I think Australia plays kind of an interesting character in itself, of where you're having this last refuge against an alien race and an invasion. So for you, and I know you may be a little biased because you're from Australia, but what is it about Australia in itself that can be its own character?
Great question. First of all, I think audiences in the US are going to see in Australia that they haven't really seen before. So what I mean by that is, a lot of American films come here and shoot because of the beautiful landscapes, and even down in New Zealand. But we're going to blow that shit up. So we're going to, you're not going to be, you're going to see some landscapes, of course. This is Australia, post with the 2 years into an occupying invasion. So it's going to be a very, very different side to our beautiful country. It's kind of interesting, and for everyone with a keen eye, you can see the iconic sort of opera house in Sydney, and there's a large weapon hurtling towards it. So it kind of sets up what's going to be happening for the rest of the film.
Well, but I also think there's a lot of attitude too when you're dealing with Australians. Like, we are the last refuge of society. We're going to give the aliens a run for their money. Try and wipe us out more than any other place in the world. So
well, that's it. Are you talking about the pandemic now?
I guess it could go either way.
It's quite like what do you think? Oh, we're a bit isolated, because Aussies, we like to complain about how far we are from everything. It's a 13-hour flight to get to Los Angeles from Sydney. And and also stuff. But when the pandemic and things like that hit, it's like we're pretty good with this isolation thing. We're okay. All right.
Got this down. Right. Yeah. All right. So, and getting back to talking about sci-fi films, in the evolution of your character, who is, as you talked about, kind of, I don't know if washed out is really the right word, but dealing with, his own career, and then he has to step up and be a hero in trying to survive. What do you think is the best aspect of his character as he's evolved from, this first film to the film you have now? And then the second part of that question is, where do you want to see your character go for the third film, which we are promoting and we want to see happen at this point?
Great question. For me, the most interesting part about the character, what I saw in the early drafts of the second film, was the conflict. So obviously in this film, there's great conflict, especially with Amelia and some of the other human characters.
Sure.
Obviously, Amelia wants to create a peace and work together to share the planet. There's other humans who, hey, you guys invaded us, so let's just wipe the aliens out. And here's Matt sort of smack bang in the middle. And he's completely conflicted. Sure, he's trying to fight and survive for his people and help his people survive. But there's also moments there, especially early on, where he could pull the trigger and he doesn't. So for me, I find that sort of thing fascinating, because he really does get sort of, it might seem he leans towards that more aggressive, wipe them out side.
Right.
And really, you can tell there's a real heart there and a real conflict. And I think, and not to speak for Luke wanted that discussion on the way home from the theater, because I don't know, sometimes films these days, it's color and movement, and it's pretty linear. What's going to happen? There's no discussion. I think it's important when there is, discussion, and we recommend peaceful discussion here from Occupation Rainfall. But that's that interesting thing about films that, it's like seeing a Guy Ritchie film. Oh, did you see that bit? Did you see that bit? You have to watch it a couple of times to see all the nuances and all that sort of stuff. So that was certainly the goal for Matt. And what do I want to see? Without giving too much away, I think it's going to be interesting now with Matt to see where the film's left, and his ally, his one ally in particular, that is probably I think they need their own spin-off show, number one, The Adventures of Matt and ... I think that's going to be interesting. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to explore, because where we leave Matt is he's not on home soil, shall we say? So how does he sort of navigate that? He's now no longer on planet Earth, as we say. So it'll be very interesting to see that dynamic and just explore his. Is he ready to become that leader that they need him to be? Because at the moment, he's still sort of finding his way. So it'll be very important.
I got time for one more question, and it's our pretty question that we like to ask all of our filmmakers. If you could have a weapon of choice or a superpower from within the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you personally choose?
The ability to know what women want. For dinner. Ordering. I've been with my beautiful partner for 5 years, and every time the menu comes out, it's just,
If there's a God out there, that's how she keeps men humble, by allowing us not to know what they really want. So we're just left wondering in the dark.
Yeah, I've got to say, look, there's too many that honestly, I'll stick to that answer. There's too much stuff. I could never pick one thing. I did like that. There's a Jupiter's Legacy. There's a show where the guys got the tube kind of goes anywhere and it takes you anywhere. I thought that was just a fascinating thing. Not your conventional sort of superpower, right? But I just thought that was that's on Netflix for everyone at home.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a really fascinating, interesting superpower. Because it's like a scroll, right? Almost as well. It's like a metallic. Let's not give too much away of someone else's show. And it kind of can go around the world and teleport you.
I thought that was one of the more interesting parts of that show. So that's interesting that you bring it up. Yeah, that's a great answer.
Yeah, well, because it's interesting, right? It's not, because that, again, it's not a cliche thing where you're flying and shooting laser beams out of your eyes or whatever it is.
Right.
It's like, it makes people think, where would I go? What would I do? So I think
that's a great answer. All right, I got to turn you back over to Brad. Thank you very much for interviewing with us. One thing I do want to suggest is to round out your character, you got to have the great hero speech in the third film, kind of like Independence Day or Idris Elba and, you know, Pacific Rim. So I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion for Luke as he's writing and all that. You got to have that speech. That'll round out your character.
And mate, trying to fit in any speech in this film with time for it's funny that there's a lot of lines that get cut short and then cut to the more explosions. I think it'd be a 4-hour film if we had all the writing in that all the actors always want that. You know what I mean? It's like the fans want the explosions and the, you know, and the merchandise and all that sort of stuff. But you know, like I'm always ready for that big speech. So who knows?